Hello, hello. Welcome to live stream number 3 of the Law of Freedom, titled Deeper with Definitions. So we're going to be going over some definitions that people are familiar with my content, have already seen, specifically in the Funnel 4 presentation, and maybe some other stuff, and some new stuff I'm defining as have some common ground of understanding for anyone who's not familiar with these concepts or the law of freedom, explaining a lot of stuff around it so that there's a deeper understanding through these definitions. So here's the presentation, 45 minutes, and then afterwards we'll see if anyone is available to come online. If not, that will be the end. So see you in 45 minutes, and maybe we'll have a chat. Hello, my name is Chris Nelson. My site is evolveconsciousness.org, and I will be presenting the Law of Freedom Part 3, Deeper with Definitions. And the purpose of this presentation in Part 3 is to go deeper with definitions about terms and concepts that underlie the understanding of the Law of Freedom. So I've already went into the understanding of law. Now we're going to go more into freedom and the aspect of the law of freedom that produces freedom, which is morality, and the corollary, which is immorality, and the opposite of freedom, which is slavery. So defining those, and if you're interested in more of those definitions, I have the presentation series on natural law, the science of morality, Part 1 on rights, Part 2 slavery, Part 3 true freedom, Part 4 morality. So those go even more in depth, but this will just be providing a summary of all those definitions to have a better understanding, and some additional aspects of some definitions like consequences and something I refer to as the principle of quantity. A right is an action that doesn't inherently initiate harm to another sentient being. Initiating harm, a wrong, is theft of rightful property. Property is based in ownership. The default ownership of a sentient being is their body and their will, which is self-ownership. Other rightful property is acquired by mixing labor with natural resources, which is known as original appropriation, or the other way to obtain property is with voluntary exchanges. There are 7 primary property violations, these are the wrongs, which are thefts of types of property. So the 7 property violations or thefts are murder, the theft of life, rape, the theft of sexual association, assault, the theft of bodily integrity, or you could say bodily well-being, but it's more the physical well-being, not taking into account how your body, your physical well-being feels in terms of emotions. So it's not because you have a psychological or emotionally distraught and you feel it physically in your body as a physiological thing. It's really the physical integrity. That's why I call it the bodily integrity of your body. Coercion or duress is the theft of free will choice or consent or your autonomy. Standard theft is the theft of standard property, things you own like a pencil, or you made a house, or you made something, or you bought something. Trespass is the theft of the security of your living domain, and willful deception, which is fraud, is the theft of the ability to make informed decisions. So I've gone into this more in depth in, as I mentioned, Natural Law, the Science of Freedom, Part 1, Rights, and Part 4 on Morality. So you can take a look at that. I think more in depth in Part 1 on Rights. Slavery defined. Slavery is a false claim of ownership, theft, on another's rightful property. A society of slavery is when there is an accepted, widespread, and persistent or repeating claim of ownership on others' property. Immoral behavior, theft, is a false claim of ownership, abbreviated as FCO, and de facto enslavement, taking property from someone who initiated no harm, nonviolent, the person's being nonviolent, is taking their freedom, which is creating slavery. Making nonviolent people do or not do things by threat of violence is coercion, which is a false claim of ownership. So that's what the wrongs, here the property violations and thefts. Another way of looking at it is it's a false claim of ownership because you're claiming to own something. You're making a claim upon someone else's property that you don't own. Hence, it's a false claim of ownership, and that's theft. And that's why they're called thefts. So there's a lot of interrelated terminology and definitions that you can use different words to mean the same thing. A society that views some people, which would be authorities, as having the, quote, moral right to issue commands that others have a, quote, moral obligation to obey under penalty of violence, again, that's a false claim of ownership, is a society of slavery where some are masters who have authority over others who are slaves. And hint, hint, hope you realize that. That's the society we live in, is the authorities. People believe that they have a moral right to issue commands, and that's the legal system, the fake laws, not the true law, like a true law of the universe. And everyone else is morally obliged to obey. Otherwise, if you don't obey their false claim of ownership, their initial false claim of ownership, they're going to increase the severity of violence and the severity of making false claims of ownership upon you in higher degrees of property violations. So that's where you're a slave, because people are making false claims of ownership, and then that's persisting. So it's in perpetuity, it's duress. So it's coercion in perpetuity, where they're saying you have to do something, and if you don't, well, I'm going to hurt you more. I'm going to take something more from you. Slavery has to be created. It's not the default condition of a being. True freedom is the default and gets degraded by immoral behavior. True freedom defined. True freedom is the absence of persistent or repeating false claims of ownership, that is to say, slavery, in the aggregate, with the respect of everyone's natural rights and their defense when not respected. Preserving and restoring freedom comes from free will. Free will has consent. Violating someone's consent for what they allow to be done with their rightful property is taking that property and freedom away from them. That is theft. And creating a temporary or persistent condition of the opposite of freedom, slavery. A temporary theft is an injustice that temporarily degrades true freedom, while persistent conditions of theft create the condition of persistent slavery. So you could look, you might make the correlation of, well, when someone's making a false claim of ownership, theft, violence, they're creating an injustice, and as long as an injustice is there, then true freedom isn't there. But that's not the case, because something could be done at an instance. Imagine a world where someone robbed someone, and that's the only thing that happened for the next 10 years. And other than that, there was no immorality occurring. Well, true freedom would still be there. At the time that it happened, true freedom would not have been there. But when it happened, true freedom was degraded because that act, the false claim of ownership, was there, but it wasn't persisted, so it was an instance. And when it's repeated over and over and it keeps happening, well, that means your condition is where you have false claims of ownership repeated, and that's the coercion we live under threat of greater violence if we don't comply with the commands of our would-be rulers and masters. So when it's persisted, then you have slavery. And that's when true freedom is degraded and gone permanently. And if it's not repeated, then it's just an instance where true freedom goes down and then it comes back up. Everyone has the right to unimpeded use of their rightful property and to live by voluntary or consensual interactions with others. Those who initiate harm, or committing a theft, an act of theft, abandon their right to consent to harm and can have negative consequences applied. Morality defined. Morality consists of objectively defined rules of right and wrong behavior. Basic moral behaviors, I refer to as M1, are a right because they don't initiate harm. And that is a theft. You don't have a right to do primary immoral behaviors, as I refer to that as I1, because they initiate harm, which is a false claim of ownership and an act of enslavement, and that is creating evil. So the basic morality is M1, you don't initiate harm. If you do initiate harm, that's something you don't have a right to do, and that's primary immoral behavior, that's I1. If you want others to initiate harm, even though you're not doing it yourself, then you're also primarily immoral, that is I1. If you don't tolerate the persistent evil, if you tolerate the persistent evil, which is also persistent enslavement, by doing nothing to try to reverse it, then you're letting evil be. You're letting evil run amok, which isn't creating evil itself, that action of letting it happen, not doing anything to try to reduce it, reverse it. So it's not a primary immorality, but it is a secondary immorality, which is I2, as I refer to it. The work to reverse conditions of enslavement and bring back true freedom is the great work, and is accomplished through moral education. And this is higher morality, and I refer to that as M2. Respecting the rights of others, the non-aggression principle. You respect the rights of others, the non-aggression principle, otherwise you engage in wrongful harm, which is theft, and others have the right to defend themselves against your violations of their rights, which will result in rightful harm to you, and that's the self-defense principle. Physical defense against evil is also a higher morality, M2. So there's two pathways to the higher morality. One is through moral education, the great work, and the other one is self-defense principle against evil. So they both work against evil to reverse evil or to bring justice to an injustice. Morality and slavery. Being moral is to interact with the property of others with their consent. Being immoral is to interact with the property of others without their consent. There is no implied consent, as though you can do anything with another's property by default, unless they explicitly say you can't. So you might have the idea, it's been said that the manipulators, the controllers, dark occultists, the evil ones, the hidden hand, whatever, they're being immoral, they're doing immoral things, and some may view that as, they're allowed to do it because we're not saying no. That's just their perception of it. It doesn't matter if you don't say no. If it's someone else's property, it's not automatically that you can do anything you want with their property unless they explicitly say no. That's not how it works. The default is, no, you can't do anything you want with another person's property, another being's property. By default. The default is you can't. And to do something, you have to gain consent. They have to agree to it. Being moral is to not treat others like your slaves by going against the consent of interacting with their property. Slavery happens when others don't get to choose what someone else can do with their property. Your will supersedes or overrides their will. Slavery is where you act as a master over others. You decide for them without their non-coerced consent. You act as if you own them in some way. When you use property without consent, you are stealing. You are deciding for them, as if you own them and expect them to just take it. It's making a false claim of ownership. Slavery and freedom. Slavery is the opposite of freedom. Creating a false claim of ownership, be it temporary or persistent, is creating slavery. An instance of a false claim of ownership is an instance of enslavement. A repeated or persistent false claim of ownership creates persistent slavery as a permanent condition of life. Behavior makes the false claim of ownership. No one has to verbally state, "I own you," for a false claim of ownership to be made. The state of true freedom is present when there is no false claim of ownership. The state of true freedom is absent when there is any false claim of ownership. If the false claim of ownership is persistent, true freedom doesn't return until the false claim of ownership stops persisting. If the false claim of ownership is a temporary instance, then true freedom degrades temporarily but returns despite an injustice not having been rectified. Not having true freedom, while still having some freedoms, is a degradation of true freedom and is slavery. For example, duress is persistent slavery, persistent injustice, and the permanent loss of true freedom while that condition persists. A mugging is temporary enslavement, an injustice to be rectified, but with true freedom not persistently degraded. So I hope that's clear that there's some false claims of ownership that are temporary. They happen once, they're one and done. And so true freedom, a long time, true freedom goes down at that instance, and then it goes back up because that instance didn't repeat. But we live in a society where duress, the perpetual, persistent, in perpetuity coercion of do this thing that I don't have a right to make you do or to make you not do, to prevent you from doing something. And if you don't do what I say or don't not do what I say you're not allowed to do, then I'm going to hurt you more. I'm going to initiate harm at a greater degree. So do this, pay taxes, or else I'm going to kidnap you and put you in jail. Pay taxes, or I'm going to apply a fine before I kidnap you and put you in jail. Don't ingest this substance, or else I'm going to give you a fine. If you don't pay the fine, then I'm going to kidnap you and put you in jail. And if you try to defend yourself against my aggression, my violence, my false claim of ownership upon you, then I'll execute you. And that's the way agents of the state operate. That's what every employee of authority of the government, which is a representation of authority, and prior to government there were monarchies or there was religion, and they commanded things and applied punishments to people for not obeying them. And they were always false claims of ownership. When the person was not initiating harm, they had a right to do what they were doing. Consequence. From Old French, consequence, result. And modern French, conséquence, Latin consequentia. And it's from the stem of consequi, to follow after. So we have to follow after, something that falls after, something that's a result. So the common understanding of consequence is of a negative result to a person who created an undesirable behavior, often a negative, immoral behavior. But consequence is any result. Consequence is an effect which follows a cause. Behavior can have positive or negative results, which may or may not affect others. The results that affect others can, in turn, through reciprocity, have others create behavior which can have positive or negative results upon the originator of the first behavior. This process can repeat, and in flawed ways when there is a failure to understand objective morality. For example, people creating immoral consequences, which is the government violence, take your pick, in response to others who create moral consequences, such as righteous self-defense, to those who initiate harm, which are violators of natural rights. So this is how it can repeat. You can have this chain of consequences applying, in this case, it's negative results, and it's applied in a flawed way because it's a failure to understand objective morality. So people think the government has a right to do it against people who are not violating morality, who are not violating the natural rights of others. And those would be the people who create moral consequences, for instance. And so people in society view those people as being violent when they're applying consequences to those who actually initiate harm. So things are backwards in society because people don't have the knowledge of objective morality. So this application of consequences as any result, something that follows after, is being corrupted. And I'll talk about consequences more in subsequent parts of the presentation on the law of freedom that have to do with karma and getting into that. And I've already talked about it a bit, I think in the previous one, part 2, when I was talking about you have a desire, then you make a choice, and well, what's the consequence from that choice? And did you get what you wanted? Freedom and unity is based in morality. So this is just a chart representation of the law of freedom, what we do and what we get. Well, you're going to live in morality, truth, united with moral truth. Well, then what you're going to get is unity with other people. You're going to get freedom. You're going to get peace. So right actions lift you up. Conversely, wrong actions weigh you down because you're in immorality and falsity. You're divided from moral truth. You're in division with the moral truth and with others. If you're in immorality, you're going to create slavery. And instead of peace, you end up with war, with conflict. True freedom or freedoms. So this is clarifying how people view freedom in terms of freedoms that apply to them. They're free to do this, they're free to do that. So people think that in whatever country they're in, that they're free. I am free. Yes, you are actually free in nature. You're actually a sovereign being. But the condition you live in isn't freedom. People believe that the condition they live in is freedom, but it isn't. So most people think that way. They live in a free country, but they don't. They have more or less freedoms, but that's comparable to true freedom in a society, and we don't have true freedom. So on the left, there's no freedoms, and on the right, there's true freedoms. And in between, you can go towards the left, which is having less freedoms, or you can go towards the right, which is having more freedoms. So these are the amount of freedoms that are allowed by authorities, because they're the ones taking it away in our society as we have it. And this is our enslavement degree. And the more you go towards the left, the more overt and in your face it gets. So right now we have more covert, so it's not obvious and people don't see it. And the non-aggression principle, the self-defense principle, is restricted or violated when you're living anywhere that's not on the right side in true freedom. Well, that means you're living in restrictions and violations, because you have more freedoms relative to less freedoms, but you don't have true freedom. So this is where we have tolerated wrongs, normalized and persistent slavery and injustice that is unrectified. You have freedoms, but not having true freedom. So true freedom is where, instead of having your non-aggression principle restricted and violated, or the self-defense principle restricted and violated, it's upheld. Untolerated wrongs, no persistent slavery or injustice. The injustice is remediated. So what we're living in is we have licensure, prohibition, and taxation. So that's an example of how we have less freedoms than true freedom. And it gets worse, right? From that point, you could go to increasing the physical severity. So going from more covert of licensure, prohibition, taxation, to the more overt forms of the loss of freedoms, which is the increase of slavery, and that's going to ball and chain slavery, the chattel slavery. It's in your face, and what most people only view as slavery. And if it's not that type of slavery, then they don't consider it slavery. You can check out Natural Law, the Science of Morality, Part 2, Slavery, where I go into that more in depth. Because if someone is taking any percent of the fruits of your labor, whether it's 100% or 99% or 1%, that's still making a claim of ownership, a false claim of ownership upon your property, and therefore upon you and your body and what you produce with your body, and therefore upon you. True freedom as an absolute value. So we're going to talk about true freedom, looking at it as an absolute. And that's what I've already been talking about, is it's an absolute, right? On the previous chart on the right, well, it's absolute. And if you have a degradation of that absolute, then you don't have true freedom. Each individual in an area makes up that grouping. If you have a metric of health or illness of a group of people, that means you have to measure how many people are healthy or ill. Then you can say how much of a majority or quantity are healthy or ill. If there is one individual who is ill, then the group isn't fully healthy. If everyone is healthy, then the group is healthy. The same goes with the law of freedom. There is the metric of how much freedom each person has, and added up is how much freedom there is in total in the group. If everyone has all their freedoms, so all your natural rights respected, that means you're truly free, then the group is truly free, and that is the condition of true freedom. When one person loses a freedom and is no longer truly free, they don't have all their freedoms. This happens as a result of another person being immoral towards them. As more people are immoral, they are removing more freedoms from others, and the aggregate state of freedom degrades more. Hence, the formula that Mark Passio came up with, which is the aggregate freedom is directly proportional to aggregate morality. And you go back to my part 1 in the law of freedom, where I go into that more in depth. And this is talking about persistent immorality. So persistent loss of freedom. So you can no longer be truly free at one instance, but then after that instance of a violation, the injustice might still be there and it hasn't been rectified. But you're free again after that. So we'll get into that later in injustice and a debt to be repaid. Well, we won't talk about that right now. True freedom as an absolute value. The sum of freedom is proportional to the sum of moral behavior, and immoral behavior reduces the maximum amount or quantity of freedom. So here's an equation I made. So TF is true freedom, and that equals absolute freedom, which is directly proportional to absolute the morality of each individual. So it's another way of looking at the law of freedom in terms of looking at it as absolute freedom, because true freedom is an absolute. So I'm just using those, the 2 bars. That's the symbol for an absolute value. An absolute value is a value that's not in the negative. So true freedom is when there's not a degradation of true freedom. When freedom is an absolute, it means it's not reduced. And that's because morality is at an absolute, meaning it's not reduced, which would mean there's immoral behavior. That's what would mean that morality is not an absolute value. The absolute it can be. There would be a negative in that behavior because you'd be being immoral. So it wouldn't be positive, it'd be negative. And freedom as well. Well, since it's correlated to morality, then it would not be an absolute freedom, and then therefore you don't have true freedom, because true freedom is only possible, it only equals true freedom when you have the absolute of freedom. It's only in the positive, and the behavior is only in the positive in terms of morality. Therefore, true freedom is all freedom and contains no non-freedom, which is absolute freedom, meaning no slavery. If you have some slavery, then it's not absolute freedom because there's some non-freedom. This is proportional to all individuals having no non-moral behaviors. Absolute morality, meaning no immoral behavior. If immoral behavior is introduced and repeats, so hence repeats, it's important, it has to be repeated and persistent, then freedom is degraded, absolute freedom is no longer present, true freedom is no longer present. Then the defense principle needs to be employed to enact justice and to restore and maintain true freedom. Moral unity is required for people to love their neighbor as themselves, to be their brother's keeper, and reciprocate involvement in restoring justice for injustices to anyone and everyone. Otherwise, you stand alone against violators, and the restoration of justice is more difficult or impossible in some cases, and true freedom is never restored. True freedom depends on moral unity between individuals upholding justice. True freedom is collective. As long as there are two or more higher order consciousnesses, then true freedom is collective. And by collective, it means by all and for all. Higher order consciousnesses are those that have the capacity to understand objective morality, to choose between moral and immoral behavior, and to communicate the goal to reach true freedom via moral behavior. So I went into these points in the previous part 2 of the Law of Freedom. You can check that out. True freedom is maintained or restored by all, for all, ideally via justice for all, by all, or at least by a significant quantity to make it happen. Without applying justice through the sacred masculine defense principle, when injustice is repeated, true freedom is lost. Losing true freedom permanently requires others who can keep it away through persistent initiation of harm, which is violence and injustice. But it's always possible to find true freedom again by restoring it, which is to put a stop to the repetition of violence. And so long as the violence repeats, so long as the immorality repeats, and that keeps the condition of slavery as a permanent condition, then true freedom is gone. So it takes people applying defense, either for themselves or for others, together in unison, united with morality, to bring it back. True freedom together. True freedom only happens together. That's why it's collective. Freedom for you alone isn't true freedom. If you ignore the violations done to others, you invite the ignorance of others when violations are done to you. That means they're going to ignore you. If you ignore what happens to other people that's wrong, well then why would they pay attention when wrongs are done to you? You jeopardize your own freedom, and that's what we're doing as a society through our cowardice. Individuals are not united with morality in themselves, and we are not collectively united in the aggregate, and at least a significant portion of us, a significant quantity, a majority, we're not united together through morality as true beings, truly moral beings united together. So we jeopardize our own freedom because we're all not standing together, united against injustice, united against wrongs and immorality. So when the violation persists, you won't have freedom in the future until it stops repeating. And that's what we have. We have the persistent repeating violations, and they're not stopping because we're not making them stop, because we're not morally united, because as individuals, we are not united with morality. Too few of us are. Stopping persistent slavery is easier with others, and it's often necessary. So if something happens to you, one individual does something wrong to you, creates an injustice towards you, you can deal with it on your own in some cases. And it's always easier if you have more people with you, united with you, to deal with that one person. But when it's a lot of people, like hundreds or thousands or millions, then you alone, well, you're not going to be able to deal with it. So that's when it's necessary that you need to be with others to do it, to make it happen. You could be completely free at one moment, and the next someone is violating your rights. Do you want to be all alone to defend yourself or seek justice? I'm not saying, can you not defend yourself? I'm saying, do you want to be all by yourself to try to, in a situation where something happens? You can be, and you can defend yourself and learn how. But do you want that, or would you rather be with a bunch of other people? Well, obviously, we'd want to have a bunch of other people backing us up. The same with justice. To seek justice, well, you'd want other people to support you. So good luck against multiple violators. If you think you're just going to do that alone all the time, to defend yourself alone or to seek justice alone when there's multiple violators, which is what we live in. Who's going to help you if you won't help them? No one. True freedom depends on unity with morality as an individual, that is to say, being a moral individual and being united with other moral individuals. Unite for cooperative defense and justice, or be alone to deal with violators. So long as one is persistently enslaved, suffering, we are all suffering, denied true freedom. We are all denied true freedom if one is persistently enslaved and denied their freedoms. True freedom for all, or true freedom for none. And you can take a look at Natural Law, the Science of Morality, Part 3, True Freedom, I go more in depth on that aspect. Individual and collective, or aggregate. So this is to clear up people's misunderstandings of the importance of the collective or the group or society versus the individual. So the collective or aggregate we never supersedes the rights of an individual. Any subversion of individual rights by other individuals claiming the superiority of a group invalidates the integrity of their group. The group or collective is never superior to individual rights. So if individuals are claiming that their group is superior and they're subverting individual rights, well, it negates the moral integrity of their group, and the group is, we can say it's worthless on moral grounds. An individual tree or human exists. You can pick an individual anything. I'm using a tree because we have a grouping, order, construct, abstraction called a forest, that we refer to it just like humans in society. So I'm just using tree and human as examples to demonstrate this. The collective, like a society or a forest, refers to grouping of individuals, individual humans, individual trees. The abstraction of a forest or society is predicated upon the existence of primary substances, and those primary substances are trees or human individuals, and doesn't exist as a group without it. The forest or society is secondary. Individuals are sovereign. Any group or collective that doesn't respect individual sovereignty, like society, that collective or group known as society, isn't a moral we. They're not a moral society, nor are they a true unity in true cooperation. So if you want true cooperation and true unity, you got to go through morality. Otherwise, you have bullshit unity, bullshit cooperation. It's a master-slave collection. So it's a collective of an aggregate of master-slave relationships, not a collection of individuals respecting each other's sovereignty and rights. You're expected to subsume yourself to the superiority of the collective we, represented by authority that perpetuates the master-slave relationship and violates your sovereignty. Here's something I call the principle of quantity, or the principle of the majority. So it's a numbers game. the aggregate reflects the majority. Whatever there is the most of is what the condition reflects. Add 2 drops of red paint to a blue bucket, and it's still mostly blue. Mix 1,000 buckets of red paint with 1 blue bucket, and you still have mostly red. So you can see this, how the red in the blue, well, it's mostly blue, but it's not, as I write at the bottom, the law of freedom is not all freedom equals not true freedom. So that's what I was talking about earlier, about the absolute. It has to be absolute freedom. There can't be any negative away from it. There can't be any slavery. There can't be any violations. It has to be absolute morality. And if there's immorality, then you don't have absolute freedom. You don't have true freedom. This operates by the law of freedom. Because if something is not all blue, well, then it's not pure blue. It's not true blue. It's been diluted from that true blue sense. And if the same thing with the red side, it's not purely red if you have some blue mixed in. And if you mix them both, well, you don't have mostly blue or mostly red, you have purple. So that's in the small circles. You can see how if you mix a bunch of red dots and some blue dots, well, you're going to get purple dots. You don't see it in the big picture as much because you see the big dots, but when you shrink it small enough, you can see how it turns into purple. And that's what happens when you mix red and blue paint. You get purple. The law of freedom. This is representing it as a chart again with a bit more description to it. So in the chart, we have aggregate slavery, societal, and we have aggregate immorality. And the goal is that 0 point, freedom and morality, to have no immorality, which doesn't create any aggregate slavery. So the aggregate quantity creating or supporting immorality, so that's the amount of people. That diagonal bar is the amount of people that are creating or supporting immorality, and that level is maintained by tolerance, and the level increases with more immorality tolerated. So this is where we are, right? So much immorality is being accepted and normalized in society. Things can and will get worse if we let it. So the work of teaching morality is required to get true freedom. So that goal is when no immorality is tolerated, no slavery persists, we have true freedom and true order. An immoral society is attached to that condition as natural, the condition being immorality, which is producing slavery. So that condition that they produce, that immoral society, they're attached to that condition of the immoral society as natural, normal, and necessary, and fights to preserve that false, conditioned way of life. You can think of the best movie ever made, The Matrix, when Morpheus brings Neo into the first construct simulation, the training program, as he refers to it. He's talking about how people are so inured by the system, by the Matrix, that they fight to protect it. That's exactly what that is. Teaching objective morality frees minds to reverse the condition of accepting the condition of slavery, thereby retracting support for the slave system. Individual resistance to the slavery mind virus decreases the collective level of tolerance to it. True freedom is the default condition. Before any immorality was created and persisted, there was no slavery as a permanent condition of life. Freedom is the default starting point. Zero immorality equals true freedom, the natural state or condition. Violations of rights are attempts to claim ownership upon the property of others, and by extension, claims of ownership upon others, which is slavery. If more immorality persists, we get more slavery, less freedoms. If less immorality persists, we get less slavery, more freedoms. In a condition of persistent slavery, not doing any immoral behavior is the moral behavior that brings things back to the balance of zero. Teaching morality is the higher moral behavior required to end immorality. When the majority voluntarily lives in full morality, absolute morality, violators are dealt with by the courage of applying consequences, by enacting the defense principle or the self-defense principle. When you have that courage, that means you're in full morality. If all you have are people doing M1, which is not initiating harm, and they don't apply self-defense, they're not doing M2, that higher morality, well, they're not applying consequences when immorality does happen. So then they're only doing one out of the two parts of what it is to be truly moral, to be a truly good person. Not teaching morality results in the absence of full morality, which allows the immoral foothold to stay and grow. So similarly, not just the self-defense principle, you have to do the great work, teaching morality. And if you don't do that other aspect of M2, self-defense principle is one aspect of M2, doing the great work, teaching objective morality is the other aspect of higher morality, morality level 2. And that means there's the absence of full morality. So only when you don't initiate harm, M1, and you do the two aspects of M2, that you're teaching morality and you're ready to apply the self-defense principle, and you apply it when it gets violated and people are in moral unison, that's full morality. And the absence of that, because you're not teaching it, well, that allows immorality for evil to persist, and it doesn't put an end to evil. So that's the end of part 3. Thank you for your time and attention. You can check out parts 1 and 2 on my site. It's on YouTube, Odyssey, Rumble. I think I'm adding it to BitChute as well. And part 4 will be coming. I have to do more work on those, so they won't be as quickly as the part 1, 2, and 3 have come out, but they will come in the future. And I will be dealing with justice, chaos and order, getting into that more deeply, and karma, as I previously mentioned. So thank you for your time and attention. Take care. Peace. Hey, welcome back. Let's fix that. There we go. Thanks for tuning in. Forgot to send the link. If anyone wants to have a conversation about this past, part 3, part 2, part 1, or natural law in general, I guess, feel free to hop on in. Yeah, it's a Video Ninja. A few of the past participants have used it. You just have to configure your video and audio, and then I guess that's it. So, yeah, I'll mention that, I think I mentioned it at the end of the video, that part 4 is going to be about karma, but I have like a lot of different slides already made, and I'm planning to like remake them because it's not good enough for me, so I'm gonna iron some things out. So let's bring in Derek. Just gotta copy this link, come over here, change this, and it should pop in. There we go.
Hey there, how's it going, Chris? Great job.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah,
Welcome.
definitely. Bienvenue, mon ami.
Yeah, you got any topics that you want to talk about, or something you saw struck your interest, or anything
Yeah,
else?
definitely. It can sound quite. You can hear me all right, right?
Yeah.
yeah, it can sound quite daunting. The true total freedom, absolute, and all these things, and yeah, it can be quite a tall task. Yet, yeah, it's just we have to start where we're at and just take those incremental baby steps towards uh, this goal, even if it can't even be achieved in this lifetime. Because yeah, it's like it's easy to lose sight and lose our motivation and that kind of stuff. But I kind of put into perspective, like back in ancient times when they believed in their whatever religion so staunchly, wholeheartedly, that they spent their whole entire lifetime building helping to build a cathedral that they wouldn't even see the finished results of. You know what I mean? So we kind of have to think about it like we have to lay down this proper foundation for the next generations, I guess, because I don't think we're going to be able to see this total freedom in this lifetime. And that's something we have to come to terms with, to accept, and just, carry on regardless.
Yeah,
Hey, what's up, Brandon? And what's up, Theo? I saw you in
there
the
he
chat
is.
earlier.
Yeah, if Theo
Should come
wants
on
to
in.
come in. Hey, Brandon. Thanks for coming on by.
So, just getting some of my tech straightened out. Just give me a quick second, all right?
Sure, no problem. Yeah, I think I had a quote about that, Derek, with in Funnel 4, the idea of, um, plant a tree that you will never get to sit under its shade and benefit from. And that's what we're doing because, like you said, like it's not happening in our lifetime. But that's what
Yeah.
we're working towards is the future. That's why in a lot of my work I emphasize the importance of the future. The future is what we actually live for. We live in the now. So, yes, present moment awareness and all that. And you don't want to have anxiety for the future or depression of the past, things that happened, and work through some stuff, whatever happened in the past. But the future is where we're heading. As soon as the present happens, it's immediately the past, technically, because then all the processing and our awareness, and then it's our memory, and that's already the past. And the things, everything we do, and then what we live for, and what we're trying to create, well, we're always looking towards the future of what we're going to do next. What am I doing later today? What am I doing tomorrow? What am I doing next year? And that's what the great year is all, not the great year, the great work is all about, is that future that we can create, that we're working towards. And, we got to have the eye of providence, the little eye of providence within us and that's like our fate and our destiny, that we are in control, like the Terminator, fate is what we make of it. So, things aren't predestined, and we can
Not
we
that
can
dark
change
fate, right?
things. What?
Not the dark fate. I think that's one of
Yeah, the
the
last one I think it was called
blunderous
Dark Fate.
movies, yeah, or
Yeah.
whatever. Anyways,
Here comes Theo.
Hey, what's up, Theo?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
yeah,
Hey, what's
buddy.
going on? Good to see you all.
Thanks for tuning in,
Yeah,
everybody. Good to have you here.
oh yeah.
So, if anyone has any comments or anything about anything that happened on part 3, part 2, part 1, or natural law in general, or whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah, of course, great presentation as always. This one, of course, you kept it simple. It kind of reminded me of your, what is it? 'Cause I took some notes here. Your natural law causal agents, 45-minute video. And the slides are kind of similar, especially when you talked about, in order to reach freedom, it's going to be a group effort, based on doing the right behavior. So I pulled up that slide because I always thought that was one of your more, better slides because, you talk about how as the individual, and you kind of touched upon this, when you was talking about the group, how, of course, how individual rights and how individual sovereignty should come first. So as an individual, we put our actions back out into the world from a subjective, standpoint. We put those actions back out into reality. So, how as a group, how as a collective, we're all going to reap what, reap as you know, what we sow back into the world. And it's kind of what this presentation, have kind of have reminded me. But I've seen a theme in the past three, and you are really hammering on the conditions as far as what conditions are going to be present, because depending on what conditions we create and put out into the world, the more and more we add to those conditions, then we're going to get a result, hence a consequence. And that consequence doesn't necessarily always have to be bad or negative, which a lot of people always equate consequence with something that's bad. Consequence can be something good too. Just sort of like you said, it's just a result. So yeah, it seems you're hammering on health conditions, because conditions can be changed. Like the state, the state of mind can be changed, and that's a thing that I've seen kind of in the past three presentations that you put out.
Yeah, that's like you said, laying the groundwork. Well, that's what in the explanation of the law, the laws of nature, natural laws, is that's what they're all taking as initial conditions, and then that process, those fundamentals in the universe, will then allow certain things to happen or not. So that's where you get initial conditions produce the resulting conditions, and yeah, that's what I'm laying the foundation for how laws operate, and using gravity to juxtapose to the law of freedom and consequence as a result, because that's what, as I mentioned, karma is what's coming next, and that's what I'm going to get into. I guess I have my karmic cosmology that I will lay out, and some issues I have with how other people can view things, like the Eastern religion one, and I find there's a lot of absence of free will in the view of trying to create a framework to answer the question why. I have a funny picture from I think it's Dawson's Creek, and the guy's like crying, and then the captions, why me, why? So that's why people ask, well, why did this happen to me? And so when you have a question, well, you're going to try to find an answer, and then you're going to use your imagination to try to find an answer. So when you come up with these concepts to try to explain why something happened to you, and then you can come up with like a framework for why does everything happen to anybody. Well, then the conclusion they come to will, especially in the Eastern one, that ties into their whole caste system, and that false, as I view, a false conception of karma is, well, you deserve it. That's your karma. Why are you in the lower part of the caste system? Well, that's your karma. You got to live with it. You got to accept it. And, that's their idea of the past lives. So you did something wrong in a past life, so now you're paying for it, and you just got to accept it. And so it's all this learned helplessness and not being able to do anything. It's very disempowering.
Yeah, you can't change, health conditions that you're in a sense.
Yeah.
Because it's your karma, and you did something, and you're just paying that debt. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I'll be getting into that, and how that, this is the answer people come up with. Why? Well, you did bad, so you get bad, and you did good, so you get good. That's why you got the good, because you did something good before. That's why you got something bad, because you did something bad before, and that's what you deserve, and that's what you're worthy of, and that's what, I forget the other synonyms. I was working on it tonight, but yeah, so when that happens, then, and people tie it also into, well, if that's not how it works, well, then that means that things aren't fair. So things have to be fair. People want things to be fair. And that ties into the ideas of, well, there has to be order, this automatic ordering in the universe that's going to bring you what you put out. And it has to be the exact same polarity. So if you get bad, well, that's because you did bad. And if you get good, that's because you did good. But it's all a deterministic view of only these automatic processes in the universe, and they're leaving out free will. So where's free will in that? Well, no, sometimes people can choose to do bad things, like you got something that they want, and they're just going to try to take it from you. And well, it has nothing to do with you doing something bad in the past, in terms of like a direct one-to-one relationship. But yeah, there's a lot of bad ideas I view as that are like disempowering to people related to karma.
They forget that chaotic, your input called free will. Yeah, that can just create chaos and that randomness. Yeah, great
Right.
point.
Anyone want to bring up anything
Right.
else?
So,
Go ahead, Theo.
yeah, so
Okay.
since we're getting a little bit into Eastern philosophy, I've been studying it. I'm living here in the Eastern side of the world, and it's kind of natural for me to get a little bit into Buddhism. So I have a book that I shared in the Europa group that is basically about the original teachings of the Buddha. This is some of them, but it's compiled in a very easy to read manner. So I think it's really useful for people just getting into it, like me. And what you talked about reminded me of something I was just reading yesterday, which is the 10 subjects for frequent recollection by one who has gone forth, I guess, forth into the path or the Dharma. So there are 10 Dharmas that should be reflected upon again and again by one who has gone forth. What are these 10? So, number one is I am no longer living according to worldly aims and values. Number two, my very life is sustained through the generosity of others. Number three, I should strive to abandon my former habits. Four, does regret over my conduct arise in my mind? Five, could my spiritual companions find fault with my conduct? Six, all that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become separated from me. Seven, I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma, and whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. 8. The days and nights are relentlessly passing. How well am I spending my time? 9. Do I delight in solitude or not? And 10. Has my practice borne fruit with freedom or insight so that at the end of my life I need not feel ashamed when questioned by my spiritual companions? So these are the 10 dharmas, and I feel like it connects pretty well to what you just discussed. Good to reflect upon.
Yeah, I had my mic muted on the stream. I just I scrolled down in OBS and it was in red, so no one will have heard, I guess, anything I said before. That sucks. Yeah, dharma is tied to karma because dharma is your what's right or justice, the law, the aspect associated with law, and karma is just action. That's all it means is action, a deed. And then it gets just twisted into. So when you do an action, it's not isolated by itself. There's a result from that action. That's why it gets associated with consequence. But then it goes off onto other tangents, which is unfortunate. But yeah, your karma is what you choose to do, and then your dharma is where like I guess the spirit in which you do it in. What is it aligned with? Is it aligned with what's right, what's just and true and moral, or not? I don't know if the dharma would also apply to the opposite as like a positive or negative dharma. I think it's just a positive aspect.
Well, according to one definition I read, is dharma is kind of like about living according to natural law, basically, really,
Yeah.
or at least attempting to, right? Like, so basically, all of us are on our own dharma, right? Dharmic path, and yeah, karma is basically just action. And yeah, it's about being responsible for your actions, for your free will choices. It's like you better own it, like, accept it, accept what you've done, and try to do better with your future actions. um, don't deny your karma, like stuff like that. I think that's what people need to reflect on, like, because people like to kind of neglect, ignore, avoid all those things, and it's not really useful at all. It's just gonna delay the karma, or like delay the consequences of the karma that you're trying to avoid or ignore. And it's not gonna lead to future good karma. So
Yeah, it kind of just goes back to planting those seeds, and we reap what we sow. And I think all you fine gentlemen here, we're all kind of like these natural, not necessarily permaculture, possibly omniculture, farmers in a sense, if you will, stewards of the land, and just trying to spread the proper messages of morality that is going to lead to freedom. And yeah, Chris, I really like that slide you had where you show the extremities of whatever. Right? You have the overt slavery and the covert, right? And so, yeah, we're kind of caught in this, the covert aspects of slavery. People don't really understand the wool's been pulled over their eyes and all this stuff. And so we're hanging out in this like comfort zone, and people don't know. It's really hard for people to get out of that comfort zone. And even, thinking about this with, the whole path work and doing the great work and all this stuff, we have to be conditioning ourselves to be more comfortable outside of these conditioned comfort zones, right? And there's a lot of aspects just on the individual level, but also as a collective, right? So yeah, there's always like the fear of the unknown and all this stuff. Well, like c'est la vie, les amis, kind of thing. Like it could be worse continuing down this horrible path, the garden path, if you will, with the candy coated slavery type of stuff, or we could really forge that new proper path, right, with the proper foundation. And kind of joking around, in the good old alchemical kitchen, trying to concoct a proper recipe for the freedom lovers pizza, if you will. You got to start with the proper foundation, the dough, right, if you will, not too crusty, right, but but that foundation, it just has to be, you have another metaphor. The bedrock of which things need to be built upon need to be those eternal principles, natural law, the law of freedom and all these things, right? So, and then you get the toppings and all this stuff, and then you get to the, first things first, as far as like principles, right? Principia, like the first things that need to be kind of established for people to really internally just get it and operate from there, as far as what to, like we have to not be complicit to all these things that are holding us back, right? So yeah, I totally lost my train of thought a little bit, but yeah, that would be a bon appetit, right?
like the bedrock of those principles is definitely a great metaphor. And yeah, what you said before about building the cathedral, I also think about it like because in the fake history they say that the pyramids were built in 20 years, or the Great Pyramid was built in 20 years, which is doesn't make any sense, because you would have to put a block of stone every 3 minutes. That doesn't make any sense at all. So, and those block of stones weigh like the same as an elephant, each one of them. So it's clear that it was built over many generations, if you use logic. So yeah, like you said about cathedral, people wouldn't see the fruits of their labor in their lifetimes. In the case of the pyramids, generations wouldn't see the fruits of their labors in their lifetime. So yeah, that's a good metaphor to think about when doing the great work. We are placing a pyramid block every day that we do the great work, and we might not see even the base of the pyramid built in our lifetime, but at least we put those foundations, this bedrock, right?
For sure.
Yeah, speaking of foundations, trying to reach people, having a good understanding and correct understanding of definitions is key and hell important when it comes to planting those seeds. From what I have observed, and that's what I've learned from Chris's work, is hell, you can get into a lot of semantic arguments, hell, with people, and if you trying to convey this message, if this individual has a different definition, you can waste a lot of time. So being able to define your words correctly is always a good plus, when it comes to communication. And that's why this one, part 3, should be almost like required watching for most people, because it's so simple, so easy to understand, how easy to understand words, how with clear definitions. It's like how I think Theo has said, like Chris, how your work should be taught a lot, how mandatory, because it seems like a lot of your work can be tailored toward a lot of people who were kind of more like left brain or like in like computer world. Because what in your part 2, you had talked about, or you had like equated the law of freedom with programming. So how would you say like your work can also be more used if someone is kind of more like left brain or like into like the computer, like kind of like computer technological realm?
Yeah. I'm pretty left brain in my thinking, I guess. I have right brain as well. True story, in Quebec, there's only, well, I know the school systems are like different all over the place, but we have K through 11. We don't have a K through 12. In other parts of Canada, it's like kindergarten. And then you do 1 to 6. That's your elementary school. And then you have high school. In Quebec, it's 7 to 11. So you graduate at 17, not 18. And then we have a stupid thing called CEGEP, which is like college, but it's like a continuation of high school. Anyways, I digress into that. But in my 11th year, I was always in Roman Catholic education for like I don't know, I guess it was the religious or moral education thing. And then the last year I went into just moral education. And there was a quiz in that one. So it had nothing to do with the church, but they tried to teach you. It's hilarious how they call it moral education and they don't even teach you morality, because no one fucking understands the definition of morality. So they're all just like, we're going to call it moral education. Well, what's moral? They don't even have the definitions. It's so ridiculous. It plays what you mentioned, Brandon. It's so important, definitions, and people just use words without even knowing what they mean. And you'd think going into moral education, they'd at least give you a definition. No, because they don't know a fucking shit about it. And but anyways, there was a quiz of like you answer a bunch of questions. I forget how many there were. And the questions they had a number. So I'm guessing like the ones that were more left brain maybe had a lower number, and the ones were like right-brained questions had a higher number. And then in the end, you added up all your numbers, and then you ended up on like a scale, right? So here, I guess you guys see this as left. Well, this is my left. I'm just gonna go with my left. So my left, or you go your left, and you're right, and you're on the scale. So everyone who was saying what their scores were, they were somewhere in the left and the right. And mine was right in the middle. It was 51. It was like 1% towards the left, like just one number over to the left. And I was like, I think your test is broken because I'm not on one side or the other. And the teacher was like, no, it's not broken. That's okay. That's just some people are more, they have a mix of both. So I do have a left brain tendency. That's what I'm more geared towards, and that is indeed, as you noticed, Brandon, that's what my work is quite geared towards, because I want to make it into something that can be understood using the rational mind, and that you can verify these things. So that's why I go into the detail and try to relate it to reality in ways that
Yeah.
people can understand in that left brain capacity, as opposed to like just trying to intuit it, or because that's can get you into trouble, just intuiting, well, that feels right, it must be true, I don't need to go deeper and figure it out anymore.
Right.
I have more
Yeah.
clarity.
Yeah. How you're big into logic.
Yeah. And the code analogy, I found that useful because, well, if you don't know code, I had that, whatever, that function that I made up just to show an example of like, that could just show an aspect of correspondence and analogy of how, maybe the laws do function like code, and maybe it is code, but we don't know if it is code because we can't see the code. But there's a lot of similarities because code and consciousness function the same way too, where you have an input and we process, and we have an output. And that's also how that core functionality in reality, those processes, like Passio says, how does he phrase it? Like, it's intelligently rearranging reality based on what we output from us. So what we output is an input into reality, right? In my whole, circle of life thing, it goes through us, and then we output our actions, but that goes back into reality, and then it can go affect other people, and then they do the same thing and output, but that was an input for them, and then reality changes, and then it comes back as input to us, and it's just every millisecond, constantly, forever. That's what's happening.
This infinite feedback loop.
Yep.
Yeah.
With everything in the universe.
Yeah.
You kick a rock, well, the rock falls down a hill and then splashes in a puddle, and the puddle has ripples, and causality is everywhere, and it has the most profound, I guess, I view it as most profound impact in us as consciousness, beings of consciousness, especially with our level of consciousness and free will, that we can interact in those causal deterministic mechanisms with our free will, and we can choose among a variation of possibilities for what we can create and modify the world into. And right now it's poor choices overall. We can do a lot better than the slavery we've come up with, but it'll be around for a while until consciousness evolves and rises to higher potentials, and then things can change. But until then, that's what we got. We got what we want in the aggregate. People want control of authority to feel safe and secure.
Yeah, it's kind of like the mommy daddy issues, right? In like the nanny granny state and all these things, and just it goes back to these comfort zones, and it's kind of like a Linus from Peanuts. He's always got that blanket, his little comfort zone, and to like rip that blanket away, it's kind of like grown ass adults, without their government, like, oh, I don't want to take responsibility and just work with the community type of thing, and of course, like we all understand that it's not just the government that's the problem. There's the corporate entities and all the hidden hands behind hidden hands, and yeah, right. But yeah, it's just people need to just cross this threshold and extract that mind virus and stop smeagling what they think is freedom, in a sense, through government, and like this ring of power. It's that absolute power corrupts absolutely type of thing. And yeah, Brennan, myself and the One Great Work Warriors, we had a really cool chat about like anti-hero and like mainstream psychopathy, and thinking about that and trying to like correlate it with the government. It's kind of like they're psychopaths and all this, right? So they're kind of conditioning other people underneath, under one nation, right, to kind of have this mini-me mentality to a degree, in a sense, right? Yet, yeah, we're always going to feel lesser than like the almighty elites and all that stuff. But yeah, it's just interesting in thinking about, all right, so the anti-hero story, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm reaching a little bit loosely because I didn't really like garner any thoughts. I'm kind of thinking out loudly, but like the founding fathers and all that, the American history of trying to break away from, the crown, the British control and all that stuff, and then setting up a, proper republic with that constitution and all that stuff. Yet, over time, yeah, of course there's, infiltrations and all that stuff. And it's like they became the monster that they set out to defeat, in a sense.
Yeah. I'll
And
pass
it's a
you.
lot more complicated than that, of course. Like, as I mentioned, infiltration and whatnot. But I don't know. It's
No, yeah,
things
that's
to
actually
consider.
something that came to my mind. That like because Chris mentioned that like we're getting what we want, but I was thinking like, do we really want slavery and like this kind of government and external authority and all this stuff and no freedom, no eternal monarchy, no all those good things, right? I was thinking, obviously, we don't like inherently we don't want those things. Those things are kind of like we are born into them, and we just accept them as just that's the way the things are, and like we just think, okay, well, this is the world I'm in. I have to do my best in this world, and like bow down to all those structures and all those external authorities and all this stuff. But yeah, like Derek, you mentioned, what also came to my mind is like those things have been imposed on civilizations, like those dark, occultist elite families, those perpetrators of war. They like, sometimes we call it like the Roman Empire, Babylon, and like there's many names to call this very, very ancient evil empire, basically, that's still ruling to this day, basically. And yeah, it has conquered basically the whole world. So those ways of thinking and those behaviors and those conditions, they have been imposed on all of us, and to such a degree and for such a long time that we have forgotten what we truly want, what is our true purpose, and what true freedom really is, even.
Yeah.
So obviously a good way to start is definitely, like also Chris, like you mentioned, with the definitions, like clarifying things, because like with moral, like the word moral is so dirty these days. When you think about, like, in the Arab countries, you have the moral police, which will kick the ass out of some woman if she doesn't wear some headdress or some whatever the fuck they wear there, which is really terrible. Like I feel bad for the women there, and yeah. I don't want to get into too religious topics. I know this can be some conversational territory. We are on YouTube and all that. Anyway, you know what I mean. It's there's nothing moral about putting a woman in a cage or beating her up because she doesn't wear some clothes.
Yeah. Hijacking words. So they just use a word and then, well, we're going to say that we're moral, but we're going to do the opposite because we're going to impose our will upon you, which is immoral. That's coercion. And if you don't do what our will says you must do, then we're going to hurt you. So then they're immoral some more. But then they're calling themselves moral. I have an early article. It's like a few paragraphs from over 10 years ago. It's evil, like something along the lines of evil veils itself in the illusion of goodness. Evil veils itself in the image of good. That's how, because they're not like trying to sell you, hey, we're trying to take over the world. Hey, we want to enslave people. You want to join our team? Marx joked about it maybe once or twice in his podcasts. And that's not how they're selling it to you. They're selling it to you under the veil of good. It's, oh, look at us. We are doing so much good and we are here to help you. You need us, because that's what the psychopath sells you. They sell you about how important they are and how good they are, but they're actually evil. So that's the whole inversion thing. They're inverting everything, and they're selling people on this inversion. And the condition you're in isn't really an excuse, because you are conditioned by the conditioned. So you're conditioned, programmed, habituated, influenced into the condition you're born in. So whatever that condition is, well, you view it as normal. So one of the big mind controls is normalization. It's a standard of society. It's how things are normal. And then since that's normal, well, you just accept it. Well, that's normal, and then it becomes natural, and then it's necessary, right? I think I had that in the last slide there with the chart. People view it as normal, natural, and necessary. So then they got to keep doing it. But that's not true. You don't have to keep doing it. And Passio's mentioned it too, that if people didn't want the slavery, there wouldn't be slavery. So deep down at some level, they want it. They don't know it's slavery. So if they had the actual definitions, like we're talking about here, right? Going deeper with definitions, if they had the definition of what slavery actually is, rather than that myopic little definition of, well, slavery is only if you're working in the field or if you're in chains or whatever definition of that overt form of slavery. They don't understand the covert forms. They don't understand it's like many things. It's along a dualistic conceptual framework, a spectrum of degrees. And so they completely dismiss anything else. But if they knew it was slavery, then they would recognize that there's something that should change. But because they don't see it as slavery, and because they're in the normal, natural, necessary aspect of the conditioned by the condition, then they just accept it as, well, there's nothing wrong about this, because they're unthinking. They don't live an examined life. The alleged Socrates quote, an unexamined life is not worth living, because they don't engage in deeper thought, in questioning what their way of life is, or I'm doing this, well, should I do it? The David Icke that Passio's quoted, about cutting we could call it a tofurkey or whatever, into the pan, and you cut the edges because the pan was shaped like an octagon, sort of, and so they keep cutting it. They don't know why, but they just keep cutting it. So that's what we're doing in society. We keep doing what we've been doing because we're conditioned by the condition to perpetuate the condition, which then conditions more people to perpetuate the condition, and it just keeps going and going and going, because people are not actually thinking. I went into this in the Natural Law, the Science of Morality, Part 2, and Slavery, about, well, that's when you're a robot. I think in the etymology of robot is it's a slave, because that's what it is. That's what you're doing. And that's what order followers do, is they become robots. They become literally mind slaves, where they do not question. So that's what we're talking about when you're in a self-examined life, when you're doing self-reflection, when you're questioning, should I be doing this? Is this the way things should be? Can they be different? Let's imagine different and better ways. Well, you're not questioning, and that's what a robot doesn't do. It's input. There's a predetermined algorithms that determine what you can process with that input, and then you output. And it's always going to be the same thing. The same conditions produce the same results. That's how code works. That's how law works. And the difference with consciousness is you can have the same results every time, and every time, even with the same conditions, consciousness can choose a different result. And that's the amazing thing and the empowering thing about our level of consciousness and our level of free will compared to the rest of the animal kingdom, is that, they're in my morality presentation, I went into it, and all animals by default are amoral, because they do not have the understanding, the capacity to understand what is moral or immoral. But we have so much more power, because instead of being on that amoral center, we have the capacity to understand these concepts and what our behavior does in relation to these concepts that we can define. And so we have the capacity for, Spider-Man quote, where with great power comes great responsibility. Well, the great power we have is to create good or evil. And that's very powerful. And we are, someone posted it, I think in the Europa, I think it was Yvonne, the most dangerous animal. That one's like pretty related to the whole non-carnist versus carnist aspect of living, where, we take what we want from all the animals, and we have no regard for them, and we are the most dangerous. because of our high degree of free will and how we can alter and affect the world around us. And that makes us very dangerous. And we could be choosing to do so much more good than the evil that we're doing. So that's the power we have, and the responsibility we have is to align with objective morality, natural law, and to choose in those requirements. You know, Brandon's got a presentation, I forget the exact title, but it's got requirements in there. What are the requirements to freedom or something like that? And so that's what we're talking about is, you know, I mentioned that was in the first one or the second one of the Law of Freedom, where you have, well, you're going to have your initial conditions, and then you're going to have your goal, your purpose, the reason for you to do something. Well, what are you trying to achieve? What are the ends that you're trying to achieve that goal? And then you can take an action. And in your result you get, and this is the scientific method, and what result did you get? Well, did you get what you wanted, or did you get what you didn't want? And either way you can learn, well, doing this gets me something I want, doing this does not get me what I want, so then I need to go back to look at my procedure of, well, what am I going to choose as behavior, and modify your behavior. And then did you get what you want at that time? Well, then keep modifying it until you figure out how to get what you want. And those are the requirements. So what are the requirements? And people don't know that. They don't know they're in slavery, so they don't know the requirements to get a different condition. So yeah, they want good things. You know what Theo was saying, they don't want the slavery, yeah. But even if they did know, like many people do know, they went through Passio's work, but are they fulfilling the requirements? No. So they can say that they don't want what it actually is, even though they don't even know what it actually is. So they actually do want it because they like it the way it is, and they don't really want it to change, or they do want it to change, but they don't know how to change it. So they lack knowledge, and the whole thing comes down to, well, you have to have the knowledge to fulfill the requirements in that process of how do you get what you want versus not getting what you want. And for now, well, they are getting what they want because, well, they're totally fine with the way the world is. They're not being like, oh, well, this isn't how I want things to be. Well, why? How can you get things differently? And then you got to start that knowledge quest. That's what it started for me in 2016. It started with Terror Storm. I watched that. I could only get through half of it. And yeah, the trivium. That's the why, the logic, the understanding. You got to ask that question why. And if you don't, you're not going to get to the understanding. So people, you know, they might be like, oh, well, I don't like how things are and la 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 la. But then they keep on going, you know, going with the flow. They're not going to try to change it, change the current, make it change in a different direction, not inputting themselves into the aggregate as a different pathway to try to make it different. Because they're not thinking the requirements. They're not thinking about, well, how do you change it? And it's just going to keep going because they haven't started that the spiritual path of truth, the knowledge quest, initiation, beginning that journey, and trying to figure things out. They're too busy trying to live life and have fun, and that's that hamster wheel. And like Brandon mentioned, that natural law causal agents infographic. You know, people are just, you're born, you live, you survive, you enjoy life, you procreate, and then you die, and then everyone repeats it. And very few people engage in that self-reflective, introspective, trying to figure things out and figuring out how to change them, which Passio has done a great service to humanity and to the universe and to truth, to help us in figuring out the real way to make things change for the good.
Yeah. It seems like everyone is just stuck in survival, and no one's, concerned about, like evolution. Because I don't equate those to be the same. So, but yeah, great points.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna have to get to a point where you will seek those spiritual truths. You seek those deeper answers, deeper meanings, and deeper truths. Again, most people, like you mentioned, Chris, are there in the comfort zones, and they're in the hamster wheel and they don't know they're in the hamster wheel. They don't know that their comfort zone is actually very uncomfortable if you really kind of shed those skins of, the snakes. Yeah, referring to the reptile class and all that shit. Anyway, yeah, that's kind of my point. Is like, yeah, uh, to you have to seek it, and what would make you seek it, I think, is something like a world-shaking event in your life, a trauma, something like that. Like, I'm sure all of us in the One Great Work Network have had to go through some shit before we realized, start, or at least began to realize those truths and began to seek it, and then actually want to learn it, want to sit down and watch a 8-hour Mark Passio presentation. It's like, it's a lot to ask from a normie. Um, but when a so-called normie has something that has happened to them that has shook their world, then they may be open to it. So I don't know if we have to go all the way to like a mercy comet that Mark is suggesting these days, but we can try to at least do it, the peaceful way, one by one, and go easy on the people. The Mark Passio can appeal to many, but I think most people would need something that is a bit more relatable, a bit softer, to reach their hearts and minds. So that's the way I see it right now. And there's even an example like from the Buddha in the book, where there's a story about a woman who came to the Buddha saying that her child is very sick. He's been sleeping for days and he's not waking up. So she asked if the Buddha can heal her son, her little child. And the Buddha took a look at the child. I mean, the Buddha was not a doctor, but he said, okay, I will take a look, see what I can do to help. And he noticed that the child is dead. He's already completely dead, beyond help. So, but the woman was totally clueless. So he knew that it would hurt her if he would just say he's dead. It would disturb her mind, right? So he figured something out. He said to her, "Okay, I'll help you, but you have to bring me some medicine, and what you have to give me is some mustard seeds." And the lady thought, "Oh, that's great. I thought he would maybe ask for some like rare medicine or something, but mustard seeds are really common in India at that time." But he said, "But not any mustard seed. You will have to bring me a mustard seed from a house in which no one has died before." And she said, "Okay, well, at least it's not something too rare. I will go try and find the mustard seed." So she went to a house. She asked, "Do you have mustard seed?" And yeah, of course they have mustard seed. And so then she asked, "Has someone died in this house?" And the person said, "Yeah, the grandfather died not long ago, just maybe a few weeks ago. Our grandfather died." So she took the mustard seed anyway, but she kept going, and she went to each and every house in the village, and in every house someone died. So it was already late at night, but it was the full moon, so she could find the way back to the Buddha. And she told the Buddha, "I went to every house, and in every house someone died. So I guess I realized that I guess my son has died too, right?" And the Buddha said yes. So I think that's that's an interesting way to think about how we can maybe reach the masses. Is like kind of do it that way, right? Like don't hit them too hard, like Mark Passio. I mean, again, Mark Passio is good for some, but I think for the most, it's better to like do it in a little bit of a roundabout way where they can integrate it more easily, and without trauma, without more trauma, right?
Yeah, we just gotta, I guess, not yell at them, make them feel bad. Gotta. That's why he says that they're babies. He's not there to spoon feed it to babies. He's there for the real men and the women who can take it and grow from it and then go out and be teachers. And yeah, I'm not, like I can get into asshole mode, but yeah, I try to do it in a calm way. In my earlier works, I was more swearing and I guess belligerent.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brandon
Yes.
knows.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm more I guess neutral now and just trying to explain things and yeah, help people understand things deeper. I'm not the keep it simple, I guess, kind of guy. Keep it simple, stupid. That KISS principle, that doesn't apply to me. I go into a lot of detail for people to really understand it and integrate it, and then I guess you can integrate it in your life and embody that truth in a deeper way, and then explain it to other people in a deeper way potentially. Well, that's what I'm trying to do as well, is make teachers. I'm not doing it as a horizontal integration like Passio said either. I'm not trying to make it fit everybody. I'm not doing TikTok, YouTube shorts and all this stuff, trying to reach as many people. My content is, I guess, dry and complex and deep and boring to some, and so be it. But those who can find value in it, well, they can find value and gain, I guess, in that knowledge quest and deeper understanding of the important things of self-knowledge and natural law, so that we can grow that tree and eventually someone can sit under and appreciate the shade of it.
You know, it's ironic. Were you going to say something, Brandon?
Yeah, because I've got
Yeah.
a huge fire when it comes to this particular topic. Because I've talked about this a lot, and yeah, sometimes the information can be a little boring. Sometimes it could take a lot. Sometimes it could, not be as entertaining. But if you have that fire, that willpower, and that inner desire to want to know, you will sit there and you will listen. Doesn't matter how hardcore it is. Doesn't matter how long the video is. And to get to Theo's point is, I think a lot of people are missing that internal flame, because they want to whine and they want to bitch and they want to find some kind of like shortcut or some kind of easy way to like understand this knowledge, and they don't want to go through that hard work that is required. Like, because if you look at Chris's natural, moral law, alchemical, distillation, the fire is what sets things off, because the fire is what creates change. And without that burning desire, without that internal fire, without that flame, without that lamp being lit, then the individual won't set foot. They won't start. Not only if they do start, they won't go into that next step of right action. So that fire is going to come internally, or it's going to come externally. There's going to be some kind of external force that's going to put enough pressure on you to where that change is going to come eventually. So since we aren't doing that internal work, and since that internal fire is not being lit, that force is coming externally that's going to force people, and that's why you have people talking about cataclysm, and like more force is going to be put on them, more pressure is going to be put on them, because that force is going to come externally. That stress, that anxiety is going to ramp up, that people are going to be forced to change because they don't want to do that internal change, because that fire hasn't been lit. But it's going to come either way. And I have a very strong, passion about that, because a lot of people lack that fire and they don't really care for truth. They don't have that strong burning desire for it.
And that Passio fire, open that can of whoop ass and kick you into action. That's what it did for me. Even in his earlier work, because I started at 2013. I was starting it And that's what I wrote. I wrote him one time, and I said, I finally kicked myself in the ass and started a site, and then in 2017 I got invited into the One Great Work network that he hadn't even started, but it was just an idea. But yeah, it's all about people. Now that's what a lot of people have told Passio to. They mention it, and when they call in, that they needed him as like the stern father figure to light a fire under their ass and like kick themselves in the ass, give them a good kick in the ass to like go, come on, do something. And yeah, like Brandon and Theo mentioned, the chaos as a teacher. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of people need, and it's sad because that's what we saw in COVID too. Was people weren't caring, and I mentioned in the funnel for one of my slides had that people had that fire ignited within them, and then it died down because they didn't have those, like Derek mentioned, the principles. They didn't have the foundation there. They didn't have the knowledge. So what we're talking about, definitions, you got to have those definitions. You don't have those principles. And so all they saw was that the level of slavery was like this, and then COVID came, and then it went up more, and so then they're like, whoa. Now that's part of the cognitive biases we have, relates to attention bias. And so when you have like a blip, this is the normalcy. Again, we're talking about things we've accepted, the normalcy, natural, and it's necessary. And then the things affected them personally. So it was like, boop, oh, look at this discomfort, right? Theo, you mentioned comfort. So that was a level of discomfort that was applying in their lives. And then all of a sudden it became personal, and then they gave a shit. Then they started to care. And a funny side thing, my presentation, originally when Chris Jansen was asking for funnel presentation titles, it's now called Truly Caring About Being Enslaved, but my original working title that I gave him was Learning to Give a Shit. That's what I had originally called it, because that's what my whole goal was, like getting people, truly caring about being enslaved. So learn to give a shit. And the people just don't until it personally affects them, because they're in that mini-me de facto Satanism. If it doesn't affect them, they don't give a shit. So COVID was like, oh, look, it's affecting you. Oh, now you give a shit. Oh, the measures got reduced again. Oh, well, now you're back to not giving a shit. So they had like care ignited a bit. It was like this little flame, and then it just extinguished after. They started waking up. There was like a little bit of, they woke up a little bit. They had that crud in their eye in the morning, their eyes barely awake. And then there's like, okay. And then they just went back to sleep. So things are fine for them. And chaos is the teacher, unfortunately. That's what a lot of people need. We saw it demonstrated. But back to what Brandon said earlier is, I think it was Brandon, when you're stuck in survival mode, you're too focused in surviving, the hamster wheel of survival. Well, then all your time is going to trying to survive. So then you're not really putting time and effort and attention into trying to figure things out, because you're so focused on survival. So there's that chaos aspect that can wake you up, but then the chaos can also keep you down because it's so consuming. And I think that's what the social engineers and the manipulators, there's like this middle ground, this like perfect area where they got us in now, is like that level of comfort and just caring. You have enough time to focus on survival, your job, and then with the extra time, you just want to spend it on enjoyment and amusement and entertainment. Those words, entertainment and amusement, of interesting etymology related to like and training the mind and captivating the mind. And that's what people do. It's survival and entertainment, and that's what they focus on. And they got people in like the perfect place to keep them comfortable slaves, that they want the comfortable slavery and they don't really want to get out of it.
They're lacking mindfulness. Like, they're human doings, they're not human beings, right? That's one key thing that I realized. Like, but I was also caught up in that. Like, even when I already was starting to do the great work and stuff like that, I was still very much in that hamster wheel in terms of always feeling like I gotta do something and having that kind of worry or that kind of
Chasing that
quiet
novelty.
anxiety.
I was got to find
Yeah,
new
yeah,
things to
that
do.
right. Quiet, like a quiet anxiety for some of it is like having to always have new things, novelty. Yeah, other parts of it is kind of like the little hamster wheels inside of me, and to break out of them, it takes a lot of mindfulness and a lot of meditation and shadow work and those kind of things. So that's another very, very key, very big key to unlocking truth, unlocking, igniting that flame is to, be able to sit still and actually like see things for what they are, both within you and outside of you, and not feel like you always have to do something because then you easily get caught in the machine. So it's to break free, to break the chains within you, and then you can start to break chains outside of you.
That's the breaks, man. No. Yeah, common theme. That flame. We gotta get it sparking within. And yeah, as Brandon, Chris, you were talking about, that external chaos is one hell of a teacher for sure. And yeah, the goal of education is to kind of avoid that on the individual level and on the collective. And so, ooh, like you hear someone like Mark Passio, oh, he's so angry, oh, he's yelling, oh, like shut the fuck up. Like they watched a sliver of his presentations, they kind of cowered to whatever degree, or just had a single impression, and it stuck like shit on the wall or whatever, right? And it's really unfortunate because I keep hearing it from people that seem to be quite intelligent, yet whatever. And anyways, and not everyone has to be like Mark Passio at all. He has his convictions for very good reasons, and that's to each their own type of thing, right? So not everyone is going to be trying to teach people that are at the level to become teachers themselves. No, we have to reach people even at the lowest common denominator. So we have to start where we're at, where we're comfortable with, speak from experience and what we've learned thus far, and keep leveling up and all that stuff, and keep refining. I was really unhinged when I first started. I was spitting a lot of vitriolic stuff because, yeah, I wanted to light a fire under humanity's ass. Since the dawning of the Rona is when I really started getting at it, just standing behind the scenes doing music mixes and then getting more on camera and speaking directly and all that stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways we can plant these seeds, right? And Chris talking about that tree in yeah, there's that good old seed conference, which I thought you were in the last one, but I could be wrong. But I'm really glad you were at the last funnel conference. And yeah, it's just the networking is just coming. We're creating beautiful circles within circles, I think. So yeah, I know it's getting at the top of the hour. I'm sure you want to come full circle on this conversation, if you will. But yeah, I guess my final thoughts is that yeah, we have to find ways to spark interest and continue keeping on and sharing what we've already done thus far, because all our works are great reference points to bring up in conversation when we're on social media and talking to people, and a certain relative subject arises, and like, oh yeah, like Chris Nelson spoke about this, it's great science and morality and that kind of stuff. So I've been doing that with my own music mixes. I try to keep that in mind with other people's, and so that's just one out of many different things that we can have at our disposal for sharing this type of information. And yeah, it just seems like it's a never-ending uphill battle against the multi-gazillion-dollar media propaganda machine, and that's just like 24/7 relentless bullshit. But yeah, we got folks like Brandon Spencer doing his own 24/7 live stream, and other folks, and the One Great Work Network. It's constant truth stream truth stream media, and that's double meaning, because there's a really great YouTube channel like that. And yeah, Chris, I think your work is just it's such a great high value resource for educational purposes, especially considering a lot of people trying to do like more homeschooling and that kind of stuff, and like creating I even thought about we can create learning curriculums revolving around your material already of what you've established, and so yeah, that'd be something that you should be compensated for if anyone does that. So things to consider with donations and whatnot, even if you learned a Shizer load from this man already. So yeah, anyways, that's all I got. Chris, thank you so much for inviting anyone who wanted to chat with you and all this stuff, and for your great work as well as always. So yeah, thanks, brother. Merci beaucoup.
You're welcome. Thanks for the kind words.
Derek, quick question. Will there be a music mix with Chris Nelson's words in the background?
Ooh, yeah, we could definitely do that. Sure, if you're cool with that, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have maybe the profoundness of certain terminology or sentence like Passio can have,
Right.
or other
Like
people.
convictions,
But,
but yeah. But Theo's trying to do more of that, so yeah, think about it. But yeah, thanks, Brendan.
But yeah, thanks for inviting me on. As always, a pleasure. And like I said, Chris Hill, you have been the one person who have, took, Pascal's work and have actually built on top of it, and that's what it's, all about, is trying to bring more to the table, bring more to the, discussion, find, what you've come to know and put it out there for others to, possibly learn as well, by not just believing you, but running it through that triggering process too, which is key, and is important. That way you're not just believing what you said, or what I said, or what Pascal said, or what anybody said, but you validating this information for yourself, and you verifying that for yourself. And the more of us that do that, and the more of us that put it back out there into the world, then others can possibly go through that same modality, and that way we can all be on the same page when it comes to understand this universal truth. So yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be providing material that even people who know Passio's stuff or other people's content, that they can etch out some more value and gain some more value to evolve their consciousness, increase their awareness of important key concepts and foundational principles to help them in whatever path that they're on. Yeah. Well, I guess we can end it there. And thanks everyone for coming on. I appreciate it. It's always good to have these conversations. These are gold in terms of conversations, especially when you look at, I guess, the normies, what they talk about, and what happens in their lives. And, I was like, okay, yeah, that happened to you today. So what? What is that doing other than, it's like, okay, maybe it's an interesting story, but people need to engage in more meaningful conversations. But yeah.
Or have a hermetically sealed twist to it, like, this happened to me, but using the mentalism and law correspondence, all this stuff, the vibe and all that, right? So yeah.
Yeah, that's a way to slide it in there. I did this, and It actually operated by this principle that you might not know of. Yeah.
You gotta turn that small talk into big talk, right?
Yeah, that requires skills that I don't have, unfortunately. Yeah,
Right. Well,
I could-
thank you,
I could
Chris.
learn.
Yeah, also very grateful for your work. You've been doing it for so many years, and keep putting that fire, and like you consistent, and you're even getting better. So it's like it's incredible to observe and to learn from you. So very very grateful as well.
Thank you. You're welcome. So next week, I doubt I'll have a part 4 unless I like go hardcore into reworking things, but I doubt it. Probably be in a few weeks. What I planned on doing was a real live presentation, this time live as live can be, and I was figured I'd do morality, the natural law, the science of morality, part 4, since it was an 8-hour presentation that I don't think many people like doing. even they see it's 8 hours and they're like, fuck this, I'm not even going to click on it. So I'll start doing that in segments, and then maybe more people can come across it as a shorter thing. And and then I'll keep working on the law of freedom and come with some fresh material when that's available. So if you guys are interested in coming on by for a law of freedom, for natural law, science of morality, part 4, morality, in an extended, shorter form, then you could come on by and have some discussions after that as well. So thanks for coming in again. Appreciate you guys tuning in and joining the discussion live. So take care.